Hey, you. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You see that 3 in the thumbnail? That means that this video is part 3 of a series. I've heard parts 1 and 2 are pretty good, so if you enjoyed this episode, consider giving those a watch too. 1991 was a weird time in the Zelda series. By this point, the only games that had been released were the original Legend of Zelda and Zelda II, two very different games with very different directions for what Zelda could be. Not only that, but it had been half a decade since the last entry, and the idea of there ever being a subsequent one, as bizarre as it sounds today, was not guaranteed. What the series needed most was not just a new title, but a landmark entry, something bold and groundbreaking that would not only impress audiences, but define what a Zelda game was going forward. Wait, what's the next game in the series again? Oh, yeah, that'll do it. This is the stuff that legends are made of. This game was so good, it became the blueprint for almost every game in the series going forward, introducing a new world, new graphics, new lore, new items and dungeons and enemies, and, for our purposes, a new Link. Although not entirely different from his past iterations, this Link still feels like a brand new incarnation, with some very specific tweaks and changes to update him for a new generation. Just like in Zelda II, this Link is about 16 years old, not quite as sprightly as the original, but more whimsical and cheeky than in Zelda II. This is a Link for the 90s, and with some of that 90s attitude, and why shouldn't he have some? He's only got and graduated to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System! Everything was bigger and more radical back in the day, more processing power, bigger games, prettier games, the green of his tunic was a different shade of green from his hat. Blast processing, whatever the hell that was. That's the type of gilded luxury you get with 16-bit. But despite all that's changed, all the more has stayed the same. He's got the same boots and tunic and belt, and of course he kept the hat. Are you kidding me? As for the pose, I chose this one because I didn't want to have Link holding his sword and shield for the 3rd time in a row. It's important to have some variety, and for this Link, I decided it was time to try out some archery. I wanted to challenge myself with a pose that would demand more perspective work, what with the foreshortening of the arm and the placement of the feet. I did struggle with getting those details exactly right, but luckily I was able to use myself as reference for the pose, just editing the size of the head and the limbs to get the right proportions. I'm slightly taller than Link at about 6 foot, so I had to make my head a bit larger, legs a bit smaller, arms a bit longer, torso and everything like that, just making sure it all fits. The biggest change this time is that Link has a new hairdo. This is our very first blonde Link for the most part. He's remained that way ever since. Do I prefer Link blonde or with brown hair? Honestly, I'm not quite sure. I think they both work for him. Although it was really nice drawing brown-haired Link for the first 2 games. I don't know, it just feels more unique, feels more classic in that way. Now, there is a bit of controversy when it comes to the hair colour, because in-game, you can clearly see that the Link sprite has a dash of pink beneath his hat. Why does Link have pink hair in this game? I don't know, because according to all the artwork I can find, he's meant to be blonde. The best guess is that it has something to do with the Super NES's colour limitations. But my guess is that if you've made his hair yellow, it would look too much like the yellow band around his cap. I debated whether or not to give Link his game-accurate colours, but personally, I kept with the precedent of taking the concept art as the ultimate authority. Otherwise, the first Link would have green eyebrows, and then what would we do? I mean, it would slay, don't get me wrong, but come on. I would be open to do game-accurate colour versions of each painting in the future. Let me know if that's something you want to see. And speaking of the game, what a game it is. Not only does it look better than the original entries, but it plays better too. It does feel like a sequel to the first game in many ways, but this is only to the game's credit. This generation of game development was all about taking what worked in the previous and making it even better. A Link to the Past is the best parts of the first 2 games combined, the top-down perspective of the original with its sprawling overworld filled with secrets, and the more focused item-based progression seen in Zelda II. You have more linear narrative sequences to guide you through the story, with more complex dungeons and more unique puzzles, and even multiple floors stacked on top of each other, Pair this with a bigger world with more NPCs and even towns and settlements like in Zelda II, and you're left with this brilliantly dense experience. There's a reason why this became the template for Zelda for such a long time, because in many ways it just works for the series. It allows for a deeper narrative to play out across the game, but with plenty of space for exploration and puzzle solving. However, that's not to say it's just a bag of old tricks, because the game's biggest new feature by far is the Dark World, an alternate corrupted version of Hyrule with its own characters, secrets and dungeons to discover. This idea of having a whole alternate map to explore is a feature that crops up again and again in the Zelda series, but this is where it starts, and it does a tremendous job of taking the play space that the player knows all too well and tweaking it just enough to make it feel new. Let's get back to the painting now. For some reason, the face was the easiest part to paint in this piece. I got it down much quicker than the last painting, probably because I could see the expression really clearly in my head. Sometimes I'm just like that. I either struggle for hours and hours on end trying to get it right, or I do it effortlessly. There's barely any in between. Funnily enough, this is the painting where I see the most of myself in Link, especially in the nose and the smirk, so maybe that helped a bit. Another interesting area of the painting is the legs, specifically the muscles running up the sides. It was interesting trying to get that area right, as often the anatomy of the leg kind of falls by the wayside for me. It's nice how consistently I'm stepping out of my comfort zone for this project. It's really challenging me to engage all parts of my brain. As for the items, we have the bow, inspired by medieval longbows, which adds a really nice contrasting angle to the piece. It was cool being able to paint in the arrowhead as well as the feathers around the arrow tip. I am very proud of those feathers actually. I don't know what happened, I just locked in for some reason in that specific area. We also have his shield, which is fascinating to me because it's almost a prototype of the design that would become the Hylian shield, which any Zelda fan will recognise from the subsequent games. I love seeing the evolution of iconic designs. It's really interesting to see which ideas stick and what design elements are left behind as time goes on. It's so close, but it's just not there yet. The final parts are just making sure the different tonal values all coalesce, which just means making sure the different parts of the body are lit properly and such, making sure nothing stands out too much or is too distracting. Like I said in the previous video, everything in your painting is part of a whole, so you have to make sure they all work together to make a satisfying image. And with all that said, and all the finishing touches applied, it's ready. Let's take a look. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I had a great time playing through the Link to the Past, and I think this painting captures everything I enjoyed about this version of Link. I'm very happy with how I managed to bring him to life. If you want to keep up with the series, you can follow me at Ted Curtis Art. Whoa, hold your horses there, bud. We still have one other version of Link in this game. You see, in the Link to the Past, when people are taken to the Dark World, they transform into creatures that reflect their true nature. And in the process of travelling there himself without the Moonstone, Link turns into a fluffy pink bunny rabbit. I mean, come on, you know I had to draw this one. There are a few times in my work where I'm actively incentivized to draw a pink fluffy bunny rabbit, and when an opportunity like this comes along, I have to jump at it. Are you kidding me? I love drawing cute little animals like this, especially bunnies. I used to have a rabbit when I was much younger who I called Harry. Until we figured out they might actually be a Harriet, at the same time a bunch of mini Harrys just appeared in her hutch one day. What I love about bunnies in particular is that they're very round and expressive. They have these wonderful little eyes that communicate so much, and I wanted to give this bunny Link that same sense of skittish anxiety and curiosity. They're nothing like hares, which look like demon spawn. I'm sorry, they're just really, really freaky. The most interesting part for me was painting his fur, because there's a fine balance between portraying the fur as a soft mass of hair and being able to see the strands that make each tuft. The material absorbs light in a very interesting way, in that the individual hairs diffuse the light as it enters, but there's still some clear notion of form in its body. The important thing to remember is that since they're very thin hairs, all packed together, they reflect light very keenly along the edges of the body parallel to the eye. And the final touches I made are his tunic and hat, because I had to give it a little uniform, not just because it's game accurate, because it's goddamn adorable. Look at him. He looks like he belongs in a Ren fair. Overall, I had a lot of fun drawing this piece. It was very nice not to have to worry about anatomy too much or the typical rules of portraiture. Usually when I'm drawing people, I get so caught up in the technical side it almost becomes more about remembering techniques than just drawing what's in front of me. So being able to draw a little bunny rabbit instead was just a really nice break from that mindset. And with that said, let's see how the final pieces turned out. I'm super pleased with how these two came together. These might be my favourite pieces so far. We'll see whether that stands as we move on to future games, but until then, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be taking a bit of a break, so it might be a while until my next video. Not that you're unaccustomed to that, I'm very sorry. If you want to see what the series is at right now, follow my Instagram at TedCurtisArt to keep up to date. Join me next time as we tackle Link's Awakening, the game that I've had the biggest turnaround on since my initial playthrough, and the piece that almost made me quit the series. Yeah, it's gonna be a long one. Until then, I hope you enjoyed watching. Have a good life.